Something extraordinary has just erupted in the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni legal war-shocking subpoenas, explosive accusations, and behind-the-scenes betrayals that no one saw coming. What really happened in this courtroom drama may change everything. We thought we knew about Hollywood power and secrecy. In the world of Hollywood, where glittering lights mask deep shadows and red carpets hide untold stories, an extraordinary storm has erupted that few could have imagined, a battle not of scripts or roles, but of reputations and truths. Blake Lively, known to millions for her performances and glamorous appearances, found herself locked in a collision with Justin Baldoni, the actor and filmmaker who brought to life the vision of adapting the best-selling book It Ends With Us. What began as a creative collaboration soon spiraled into an explosive legal conflict, as accusations of harassment, manipulation, and betrayal filled the air while cameras flashed outside the courtroom. The real drama unfolded behind closed doors, where subpoenas flew like daggers, aimed not only at powerful voices in Hollywood, but even at independent journalists and small creators who had spoken critically about Lively, sparking a chilling conversation about free speech and influence in an industry that thrives on public perception. The moment news broke that more than a dozen figures, from high-profile commentators like Candace Owens and Perez Hilton to lesser-known podcasters and YouTubers, had been targeted, the internet erupted with disbelief. Was this an attempt to silence critics or a desperate move to regain control over a narrative slipping away from her grasp? Lively, through her legal team, argued that the negativity surrounding her promotion of the film was not organic, but orchestrated by Baldoni and his allies, a claim that stunned observers given the sheer volume of voices and the diversity of their platforms. The shock deepened when insiders revealed that even journalists, who had long maintained independence, were accused of being secretly paid to fuel anti-Lively coverage demands for confidential communications. Internal notes and reporting strategies were made, raising alarms about press freedom and the sanctity of source protection. The idea that a Hollywood star would attempt to peer into the private work of journalists and creators sent waves of unease across the media landscape. But the twist came when one of the most vocal critics revealed that they had fought back against the subpoena and won, exposing the cracks in Lively's legal offensive. The revelation that her team had missed critical deadlines underscored that this campaign of control had limits, and that power, no matter how vast, could be challenged. The emotional resonance of this battle reached far beyond one celebrity feud. It became symbolic of a larger question. Could stars with immense wealth and influence use legal machinery to intimidate silence and reshape public opinion? Or would the principles of open commentary, fair criticism, and journalistic independence hold strong? The story did not end with a single victory in court. It unfolded like an unrelenting wave, each new account from those who had worked with or around. Lively painted a complicated picture, a Hollywood star celebrated on screen, yet described by some behind the scenes as difficult, demanding, and at times unkind. Former colleagues spoke of strained sets, assistants shared emotional recollections of trying and failing to meet impossible standards, and interns recounted the pain of being dismissed or ignored by someone they had once admired deeply. Each account added layers to a narrative that was growing heavier and more intricate. A narrative no longer confined to legal filings, but spilling into public consciousness through interviews, leaked clips, and online testimonies. What made it all more compelling was the silence of some once close to Lively who had distanced themselves as whispers of controlling behavior, and behind-the-scenes disputes grew louder. Among them, names once tied to her inner circle were now conspicuously absent, fueling speculation that alliances were shifting, and support was waning in a world where perception is currency. The sight of former friends and colleagues stepping back spoke volumes in every detail. Every contradiction, every allegation began to weave together into a story larger than any single person. A story of power, image loyalty, and the cost of speaking out. As the legal storm intensified, what became striking was not merely the boldness of Blake Lively's legal strategy, but the ripple effects it generated across an entire community of commentators and creators who suddenly found themselves drawn into a Hollywood battle they had never expected. To be part of the fear of being dragged into expensive litigation, the anxiety of having to defend one's words, and the uncertainty of whether personal communications might be exposed weighed heavily on many of them. Unlike large media corporations with resources and legal teams, many of these individuals were independent, operating from home studios with little more than a camera, a microphone, and the conviction to speak their mined when subpoenas arrived, demanding documents, records, and evidence of alleged secret deals with Justin Baldoni or his attorney Brian Friedman. The shock was overwhelming for some. It was not only about money, it was about principle, the right to question public figures, the right to critique without fear of retaliation, the right to be part of a conversation without being silenced by intimidation. The dramatic irony was hard to ignore that in seeking to disprove claims of being a controlling presence, Lively's actions appeared to reinforce that very image, and each attempt to control the narrative only made the narrative spiral further out of control. In the court of public opinion, journalists highlighted that even if nothing was ever ultimately produced, the mere threat of legal entanglement had a chilling effect, silencing voices before they could even be heard. The suspense grew as hearings were scheduled and deadlines loomed. Observers watched closely to see whether judges would permit such expansive demands or whether limits would be drawn to protect the independence of the press. In one crucial turn, the revelation that at least one subpoena had been fought and defeated gave hope to others who felt cornered by the situation. Yet the reality remained that not all had the means to mount such defenses, and the imbalance of power between a celebrity with deep pockets and independent creators with none became painfully clear. Hollywood insiders began whispering about what this all meant for the image of Lively, who had already been under scrutiny for her tense promotional appearances. During the rollout of It Ends With Us clips resurfaced, showing moments where interactions with the press had turned sour, from tense exchanges about fashion and pregnancy, to subtle dismissals that critics argued revealed a deeper disdain for those asking questions. These resurfaced videos became symbolic rallying points for the discussion about whether the negativity surrounding Lively was truly manufactured by Baldoni and his camp, or whether it reflected genuine reactions to her own behavior and choices. As the debate raged, the emotional tension escalated further when former crew members stepped forward to share their experiences. One assistant director recounted through posts online the difficulty of working under what she described as constant criticism and dismissiveness, experiences that eventually drove her out of the industry altogether. Interns, who had once worked on Gossip Girl, came forward to describe stark contrasts between cast members, painting Lively as cold and distant, compared to her co-stars who were described as warm, approachable, and kind. These accounts were not legal filings, but they carried the weight of lived experience, and in the world of public perception, they mattered because they shaped the way audiences interpreted everything else surrounding the case. What emerged was not simply a battle between two Hollywood figures, but a broader narrative about the pressures of image, the responsibility of fame, and the fragile balance between criticism and control. Suspense mounted with each revelation, because it was never just about what was happening in the courtroom. It was about what was happening in the minds of fans, in the conversations across social media, in the editorial rooms of magazines, and in the private reflections of those who had once looked up to Lively, but now found themselves questioning whether the star they admired was the same person described in these testimonies. The longer the conflict dragged on, the more each side hardened Baldoni, maintaining that he had been unfairly attacked and scapegoated, Lively insisting she was the target of a smear campaign, the truth tangled in layers of allegation and counter-allegation, leaving audiences on edge waiting for the next piece of evidence, the next leaked message, the next former colleague to speak out. As whispers turned into headlines and headlines evolved into global debates, the story of Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni shifted into an entirely new dimension when names outside the courtroom were suddenly pulled into the fray, creating shockwaves. Far beyond the immediate legal filings, at the center of it all was the suggestion that Lively had leaned on her closest allies in Hollywood, invoking the power and presence of Ryan Reynolds and even Taylor Swift in private conversations, as if their influence could shield her from reputational harm. It was a claim that ignited endless speculation, because while Reynolds had long been publicly tied to her through marriage and shared ventures, Swift had for years been painted as part of her inner circle. Yet as the case grew louder, reports emerged suggesting that the bond between Swift and Lively had fractured under the weight of controversy. Insiders claimed that Swift, uncomfortable with the idea of being cited as a kind of enforcer in someone else's dispute, began to quietly distance herself, refraining from public support and focusing instead on her own projects and personal milestones. The emotional resonance of this rumored shift was seismic, because for fans who had long seen the two as inseparable, the silence spoke louder than any statement as social media poured over old interactions, photos, and interviews. The narrative of fading friendship became intertwined with the larger legal saga, raising questions about loyalty, trust, and the cost of being caught in another person's storm. Ryan Reynolds, meanwhile, was not spared from scrutiny. Critics began questioning whether his considerable success and financial stability were indirectly fueling the aggressive legal strategies being employed, pointing out that high-powered attorneys and relentless pursuit of subpoenas are luxuries few could afford. The contrast between his public persona as the affable, charismatic actor and the image painted by detractors of a spouse complicit in legal intimidation was stark, and audiences struggled to reconcile the two. Every red carpet appearance, every new project announcement became colored by the ongoing case, as fans debated whether Reynolds was protecting his family or enabling tactics that seemed designed to wear down opponents. The suspense surrounding these personal dynamics added fuel to an already blazing fire, because suddenly the case was not only about whether certain allegations were true or false. It was about what happened to reputations, friendships, and legacies when private conflicts spilled into the public sphere. Hollywood itself watched closely, because the outcome of this case and the narratives born from it had implications. For everyone in the industry, if subpoenas of creators and journalists could stand what would stop another star from deploying similar tactics, what would that mean for media coverage of celebrities moving forward? The fear that independent voices might be silenced or chilled from speaking out became an industry-wide concern. Entertainment lawyers debated the boundaries of discovery and press protections, while journalists rallied around the principle that criticism of public figures is not only permissible but essential to a free discourse. The emotional undertones of the case deepened, as more stories from the past surfaced, like fragments of a puzzle that seemed to paint a more troubling portrait of lively former collaborators, described experiences of pressure and discomfort. Anecdotes resurfaced from sets where tensions boiled beneath the polished exterior of Hollywood glamour. Each new revelation, whether in a social media post, an interview, or a resurfaced clip, added to the suspense because no one could be certain what would come next or who might speak out. The unpredictability of it all gave the saga the feel of an unfolding series, with new episodes dropping unexpectedly, drawing audiences back again and again, waiting to see how it would all end. Yet through all of this, Baldoni remained steadfast, portraying himself as someone who had been unfairly targeted by accusations he argued were not grounded in fact, but in frustration over creative disagreements and shifting control of the project. The drama of It Ends With Us, ironically mirrored in the turmoil between its stars, gave the story an almost cinematic quality. But unlike a scripted film, this narrative had no guaranteed resolution and no predetermined heroes or villains. The suspense lay in the fact that reputations, careers, and even personal relationships were on the line, and each move, each filing, each silence carried weight in shaping the outcome. And so as the dust begins to settle, at least temporarily, on this sprawling legal spectacle, the unanswered questions only multiply, because every subpoena, every filing, every carefully worded statement carries the weight of implication and possibility. And in Hollywood, where images are currency and silence often screams louder than words, the strategies of both Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni are as much about shaping perception as they are about surviving litigation. The fascination lies not only in the details of this case, but in the broader truth it reveals about how celebrity battles unfold in the modern age, when every text message and every whisper of gossip can be weaponized in a court of law and in the court of public opinion. Alike, observers are struck by how quickly allies can become liabilities, and how rapidly once loyal supporters can distance themselves when reputations hang in the balance. For Blake, the stakes are towering, because what once seemed like a straightforward counteroffensive now resembles a labyrinth of shifting narratives where each revelation threatens to unravel the tightly controlled public image she has curated for years. Yet even as critics gleefully amplify her missteps, there remains a loyal contingent of fans and friends who insist that the portrayal of her as manipulative or calculating is unfair and reductive. They argue that she is navigating a system stacked against women, particularly in high-stakes disputes with men who themselves enjoy deep industry ties, but others counter that her moves reek of overreach and desperation, especially when subpoenas target content creators, journalists, and even peripheral figures who merely commented on unfolding events those critics see. A chilling precedent where freedom of discussion collides with the power of celebrity legal machines, and whether or not such tactics succeed in court. The public backlash is already reshaping her legacy. Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni finds himself in The rare position of being recast from underdog to potential giant slayer for years, he was dismissed by some as too earnest, too idealistic, too intent on reshaping masculinity through a softer lens. Yet now those very qualities are reframed as resilience, integrity, and authenticity in the face of overwhelming opposition. His legal team, too, has drawn praise for the measured way they have framed their client, not as a vengeful accuser, but as someone standing firm against unfair attacks. And the irony is hard to miss because in an industry where narratives are currency, the very act of staying calm and deliberate can become a winning strategy. But the truth is, this battle is far from over, because pending motions still hang in the air. Appeals are not out of the question, and there are whispers of settlement talks quietly circulating among insiders who recognize the mutual destruction this case could cause if it drags on for months or even years longer. And then there is the shadow of Taylor Swift, whose name continues to hover over the proceedings like an uninvited but unavoidable specter. Every mention of her potential involvement fuels headlines because few figures in modern entertainment command the same gravitational pull as Swift, and the notion that her private communications might one day be aired in a courtroom guarantees that this saga will never fade quietly into the background. Instead, it continues to metastasize into new debates about privacy, about celebrity accountability, and about the blurred line between public persona and private truth. What keeps audiences glued to this story is not simply whether Blake wins or loses, or whether Justin emerges vindicated, but what the saga symbolizes. For an era where fame is no longer just a matter of talent or charisma, but of narrative control crisis management, and the ability to withstand endless scrutiny from media and the masses alike, every development feels like a turning point, and every silence like a clue. As legal experts dissect filings and PR specialists parse body language from brief interviews, the entire affair becomes both courtroom drama and cultural Rorschach test, reflecting back whatever the public already suspects. About power, fame, and accountability in Hollywood, some see Blake as a victim of a ruthless machine, others as the architect of her own undoing. Some see Justin as a hero, standing tall against intimidation, others as a savvy opportunist leveraging the spectacle for career advantage. But in the end, the deeper fascination lies in how quickly reputations can be recalibrated when hidden truths bubble to the surface, and in how even those who claim indifference find themselves checking the latest updates because the stakes feel strangely personal. The courtroom may eventually render a verdict, but in the court of public opinion, the battle is perpetual and unrelenting. And that is why, even when this case concludes, its echoes will reverberate for years to come, reshaping careers, altering friendships, and perhaps serving as a cautionary tale for every star who believes their image is invincible. Because if Blake Lively can be dragged into such a maelstrom, if Justin Baldoni can find unexpected redemption, if Taylor Swift can become an unwilling focal point, then truly no one in the gilded world of celebrity is immune from the perils of exposure. The only certainty left is that the story is far from over, and the next chapter will be as explosive as the last in conclusion. This latest chapter of the Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni saga feels less like a courtroom battle and more like a mirror being held up to the entire culture of Hollywood and celebrity influence we are watching. Reputations unravel. We are watching private alliances shatter. We are watching the carefully curated image of A-list powerhouses collapse under the weight of evidence, legal filings, and relentless public scrutiny. It is not just about one lawsuit. Anymore, it is about how the entertainment industry handles accountability when the spotlight grows too bright, and the stories behind the scenes refuse to stay hidden. Justin Baldoni, for many, appears to have found his footing after months of silence and uncertainty. His team's careful strategy, methodical filings, and ability to stay disciplined have contrasted sharply with the chaos surrounding Blake Lively's camp. What once looked like an untouchable star standing tall above controversy now feels like a Hollywood cautionary tale, her name entangled in subpoenas, her every move dissected by pundits, fans, and rivals alike. The longer this fight drags on, the more she risks losing control of her own narrative. And once that happens in Hollywood, it is nearly impossible to reclaim. As the gavel continues to fall and new motions are filed, there is no doubt more bombshells are coming: leaked texts, shocking testimony, and maybe even celebrity friends turning into courtroom witnesses. This story has evolved into a true Hollywood thriller unfolding in real time, and the ending is far from written. For now, the only certainty is that the facade of glamour has been stripped away, and what remains is the raw, unpredictable fight for truth, legacy, and survival.